Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the polished, perfectly curated images of royalty and Hollywood fame? What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle, the glamorous duchess, the devoted mother, the media darling, was only the surface of a far darker story? What if the very people she entrusted with her children were forced to take drastic measures to protect innocent lives from a world most of us will never see? The whispers, the rumors, the carefully crafted narratives, all of them are colliding now, and the consequences are nothing short of shocking. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story starts not in Buckingham Palace, not on a Hollywood red carpet, but in a quiet, unassuming household, where a woman named Lauren Kumalo worked as a nanny for Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. On the surface, her job seemed simple: care for the children, maintain a stable household, and uphold the high standards demanded by a family constantly under public scrutiny. But inside that household, according to what insiders now reveal, things were far from normal. Lauren observed behaviors, decisions, and patterns that she could no longer ignore. She saw the children, Archie and Lilibet, not just neglected but, in ways too shocking to casually dismiss, left vulnerable to circumstances that no child should ever endure. And ultimately, Lauren did the unthinkable. She called Child Protective Services. Now, before we go further, let's pause. Think about that for a moment. A nanny, someone who is paid to care, who lives day to day in the intimate spaces of a household, felt compelled to alert authorities. That's not a casual complaint. That's a red flag, a scream from the inside of what should have been a safe and loving home. What could possibly drive a professional, devoted caretaker to take such an extreme step? And perhaps even more provocatively, what does it say about Meghan Markle, the woman publicly celebrated for her maternal instincts, her poise, her influence? Could it be that the image crafted for millions of adoring fans is fundamentally, dangerously, and shockingly misleading? To understand why this story matters, you have to grasp the stakes. This isn't just gossip or a rumor designed to go viral for clicks. This is about children, their safety, and the stark contrast between public perception and private reality. It's about the hidden costs of fame, the pressures of royal expectation, and the choices of a mother whose life has been under the microscope since the day she married into one of the most scrutinized families in the world. Every decision, every lapse, every whispered complaint has a ripple effect, reaching far beyond the walls of any house. And in this case, the ripples could be far-reaching, shocking, and deeply unsettling. But here's where the story takes a twist that no one saw coming. While Meghan Markle has been building her image as a modern, progressive mother, one who fights for equality, justice, and compassion, a renowned biographer, Tom Bower, has long suggested that the Duchess might not be the motherly figure so many believe her to be. Bower's claims were always controversial, dismissed by some as exaggeration, by others as scandal-mongering. Yet now, according to sources connected to the household, some of his most incendiary statements may have been validated by a nanny who witnessed events unfold firsthand, and by official investigations that are only just beginning to make the public aware of the truth. Imagine for a moment being inside that household. The children, Archie and Lilibet, innocent, trusting, entirely dependent on the adults around them. A nanny who knows them deeply, who has lived with them, who has shared in their milestones and their quiet, unguarded moments. And yet, that nanny reaches a breaking point. What could she have seen? What could have driven her to break her silence? Knowing full well the media storm that would follow, the legal scrutiny, and the personal risk, the answer is as unsettling as it is vital. She reportedly witnessed neglect, abandonment, and behavior from Meghan Markle that endangered the children emotionally, psychologically, and perhaps even physically. And this isn't speculation. According to sources, documentation exists. Notes, records, and complaints that form a trail of concern extending over months, perhaps even years. For those of us outside the inner circle, it's tempting to dismiss such claims as sensational, as part of the endless drama surrounding the royal family and celebrity culture. But when you hear the details, the timing, the consistency, and the courage it took for someone like Lauren Kumalo to step forward, it becomes impossible to ignore. you begin to realize that what was once thought to be a private matter of parenting and family dynamics is now a matter with public, moral, and potentially legal implications. This story, as disturbing as it may be, is one that the public has a right to understand, not because we want to vilify, but because the safety of children, no matter who their parents are, is non-negotiable. Now, let's add another layer of complexity. The children in question, Archie and Lilibet, are not just any children. They are heirs in one of the most famous families in the world. Their lives are meticulously documented, their images circulated globally, their every smile or tantrum dissected online. And yet, despite this visibility, the most crucial aspects of their well-being, according to insiders, may have been ignored. This is not a story about ordinary parental mistakes. It's about the potential failure of one of the most visible and scrutinized mothers on the planet to provide the care her children desperately needed. The contrast between public persona and private behavior is stark, jarring, and, to many, infuriating. And here is where curiosity must be piqued. You may be wondering, if Lauren Khumalo went to CPS, what did the authorities find? How did Meghan Markle respond? What are the implications for Prince Harry, who is often portrayed as a doting father but, according to insiders, may have been complicit or at least silent? How does this all tie into Tom Bower's earlier exposés, which many had written off as scandalous fiction? And perhaps most importantly, what does this mean for Archie and Lilibet, two children caught in a storm they cannot possibly control or understand? As we dive deeper into this story, the layers of deception, secrecy, and shocking allegations will become clearer. You'll see how public images can be manipulated, how power and fame can shield behavior from scrutiny, and how, sometimes, the most compelling truths come not from the headlines, but from the quiet, brave voices of those who witness life behind closed doors. The revelations are not just dramatic. They are personal, emotional, and at times almost too difficult to believe. Yet according to the accounts we've gathered, corroborated by multiple sources, the details are startlingly consistent, painting a picture that is as gripping as any drama Hollywood has ever produced. And just when you think the story cannot possibly get more intense, the cliffhanger emerges. Lauren Khumalo's CPS complaint may only be the beginning. Allegedly, what she reported is just a small fragment of a much larger pattern of behavior, decisions, and actions that have gone unnoticed by the public and unchallenged by anyone with the power to intervene. If the allegations hold weight, and if the evidence aligns with Bower's predictions, the narrative of Meghan Markle as a loving, protective mother could unravel in ways that shock the world. The implications are monumental. Not just for her reputation, not just for the royal family, but for the children who, above all, deserve protection, love, and care. So as we prepare to unpack this story, remember this. What you are about to hear challenges perception, questions loyalty, and exposes hidden truths that many have tried to ignore. It's a story of power, of betrayal, of courage, and, above all, of the innocence of children caught in circumstances beyond their control. The questions that follow will not be easy to answer, and the revelations that emerge may leave you rethinking everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle, her children, and the carefully constructed world of fame and royalty. But the most shocking part is yet to come. In the chapters ahead, we will explore the intimate details of life inside Meghan Markle's household, the precise moments that led a dedicated nanny to take action, the legal and emotional consequences of that decision, and the ripple effects that could redefine public perception of one of the most famous women on the planet. And as each layer unfolds, the question that haunts every chapter remains. If the most trusted adults fail the children, who will stand up to protect them? The story begins here, and the revelations are just starting to surface. Buckle up, because what comes next will be a journey into secrets, scandals, and shocking truths that may change everything you think you know about Meghan Markle and her family. What drives someone to break the most sacred rule of loyalty? To step into the spotlight, knowing the personal and professional consequences, and reveal secrets that were never meant to escape the walls of a home? For Lauren Khumalo, Meghan Markle's longtime nanny, that breaking point came after witnessing months, perhaps years, of behavior she could no longer reconcile with the well-being of the children she had vowed to protect. What you are about to read is the story of courage, fear, and an extraordinary moral decision, told from the perspective of someone who lived inside the daily reality of one of the world's most scrutinized households. Lauren Kumalo was not just any caretaker. She was a professional, highly respected in her field, with years of experience caring for high-profile families and understanding the unique challenges that fame brings. Her training, her instincts, and her loyalty were all finely tuned towards safeguarding the most vulnerable, children. And yet, when she accepted a position with Meghan and Harry, she entered a world that was far more complicated than any previous assignment. What began as a standard nannying role soon became a front-row seat to an unsettling reality. Children who were consistently neglected, ignored, or abandoned, not out of malice, perhaps, but out of prioritization of fame, public image, and personal agendas over basic parental responsibility. From the earliest days in the household, Lauren noticed patterns that set her on edge. Simple things, like missed meals, lack of routine, and emotional unavailability from Meghan, quickly escalated to more concerning behaviors. According to insiders, the children were often left in the care of staff for long stretches, with little to no parental oversight. Calls from Meghan or Prince Harry were brief, infrequent, and focused on appearances, photo ops, social media content, or public engagements, rather than the emotional or physical needs of the children. The contrast between the public portrayal of a loving, hands-on mother and the private reality could not have been more stark. Lauren reportedly tried to raise concerns quietly at first. Private conversations, gentle suggestions, and attempts to create a more nurturing environment were met with dismissal or indifference. She described a pattern of reactive parenting, where rules changed depending on Meghan's schedule, mood, or desire for privacy. And while the children were reportedly well-mannered and resilient, the stress and confusion they endured were palpable. The nanny's observations began to form a troubling narrative, a household where image consistently outweighed the children's needs, and where loyalty to the family's fame superseded moral responsibility. The decision to involve Child Protective Services was not sudden. It was a culmination of growing fear and moral obligation. Lauren reportedly documented incidents meticulously, dates, times, behaviors, and the reactions of adults in the household. These notes were more than just precaution, they were evidence of a pattern. Evidence that, according to sources, suggested emotional neglect, abandonment, and in some moments, behaviors that could be interpreted as abusive. The idea that someone in the public eye, someone who consistently presents herself as a mother devoted to her children, could be accused of such acts shocked the nanny to her core. And yet, when weighed against the safety and well-being of Archie and Lilibet, she knew she could not remain silent. One of the most alarming aspects of Lauren's revelations is the children's apparent emotional distance from Meghan. Sources describe moments when Archie and Lilibet would seek attention, comfort, or reassurance, only to be met with dismissal or distraction. While Prince Harry's involvement varied, Meghan's alleged disengagement stood out as a consistent pattern. This behavior was reportedly more than mere neglect. It was an emotional absence that left children feeling unanchored, confused, and, in some moments, frightened. Lauren, with years of training, recognized the long-term implications. Emotional neglect during formative years can lead to profound psychological consequences, and she feared the damage might already be done. But there was more to the story than emotional distance. Lauren also described instances of abandonment, where the children were left unattended for extended periods while Meghan attended events, social gatherings, or personal business. While no physical harm was reported in these moments, the lack of supervision in a household that housed children with limited understanding of danger was alarming. The nanny felt an urgent moral responsibility to act, despite the inevitable personal fallout, career risk, potential legal battles, and being vilified in the public eye. It was this combination of emotional neglect, abandonment, and repeated disregard for the children's needs that led Lauren to make the phone call that would send shockwaves through the household. She contacted Child Protective Services, detailing her observations, the specific incidents, and the ongoing patterns of behavior. Sources close to the matter described the conversation as tense, emotional, and resolute. A final act of loyalty to the children she had come to love, rather than the adults she served. But Lauren's courage did not end with the phone call. She reportedly continued documenting interactions, keeping a careful record of how Meghan and Harry responded once the complaint was filed. According to sources, the household became markedly tense after CPS involvement. There were subtle shifts in behavior, sudden attempts to control the narrative, and a heightened awareness of scrutiny. Yet, despite the pressure, Lauren reportedly remained committed to ensuring that the children's welfare came first, knowing that any lapse could result in ongoing harm. Perhaps most compelling about Lauren's story is the ethical dilemma she faced daily. She had entered a role built on trust, discretion, and loyalty. Breaking that trust, even for moral reasons, carries enormous weight. In a household as scrutinized as Meghan Markle's, any leak, complaint, or allegation would inevitably become a public spectacle. But the nanny reportedly believed that silence was complicity, and that complicity was no longer an option. Her story is one of internal conflict, moral courage, and the heavy burden of speaking truth to power, knowing the consequences could be personally devastating. The implications of her revelations go far beyond the walls of the household. If verified, they call into question the image of Meghan Markle as a devoted, attentive mother. They challenge the public perception carefully curated by media appearances, interviews, and social media content. They also raise profound questions about Prince Harry's role, his awareness of his children's well-being, and his response to the concerns raised by those closest to the family. In essence, Lauren Khumalo's testimony is not just a personal account. It is a potential seismic shift in the narrative surrounding one of the world's most famous families. And while Lauren's decision to speak out is central to this story, it also sets the stage for the next chapter, the formal involvement of Child Protective Services. The call she made was not simply a report. It was the opening salvo in what may become a complex investigation into allegations that have remained hidden from the public eye. What CPS discovered, how they responded, and the ramifications for Meghan, Harry, and the children remain shrouded in secrecy, but the consequences promise to be far-reaching. Yet even as we examine Lauren's bravery, there remains an unsettling question that lingers throughout this narrative. What compelled Meghan Markle, a woman with immense public influence and a platform for advocacy, to allegedly prioritize image, fame, or personal convenience over the fundamental needs of her own children? And what does it mean for a society that elevates celebrity personas, sometimes at the expense of the truth? These questions are uncomfortable, complex, and essential to understanding the unfolding story. And as we prepare to move forward, remember this: Lauren Khumalo's revelations are only the first layer. Behind them lies a network of events, decisions, and behaviors that stretch across private homes, public appearances, and the intricate web of fame, power, and secrecy. Each subsequent chapter will peel back another layer, exposing contradictions, shocking truths, and evidence that challenges the narratives we've been fed for years. When a professional caregiver, someone entrusted with the safety and well-being of children, decides to contact authorities, it is never a decision taken lightly. For Lauren Khumalo, Meghan Markle's longtime nanny, the choice to reach out to Child Protective Services was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of mounting concern, frustration, and fear. It was an act that would set off a chain of events no one in the household could have anticipated. But what happened next, behind closed doors, is a story that exposes not just allegations of neglect, but a tangled web of secrecy, celebrity power, and moral ambiguity. The first step was the call itself. Lauren reportedly approached the CPS hotline with a level of resolve that reflected both fear and urgency. She described, in painstaking detail, the patterns she had observed: children left unattended for long stretches, emotional neglect that bordered on abuse, and a household culture that prioritized public image and personal convenience over the needs of Archie and Lilibet. She spoke of missed meals, inconsistent routines, emotional unavailability, and moments where the children sought comfort only to be ignored. Each detail painted a portrait of concern that could not be dismissed lightly. CPS, according to sources familiar with the matter, responded immediately to the allegations, as a standard protocol for reports involving high-profile households. Investigators were tasked with gathering information, interviewing staff, and, if possible, observing the children's living conditions. For a family as famous as Meghan and Harry's, the process was complicated. Security protocols, legal advisors, and media considerations created obstacles that ordinary families rarely face. Yet, the seriousness of the claims demanded action, and CPS reportedly treated the case with the gravity it deserved. Inside the household, the reaction was intense. Staff members noticed subtle shifts in behavior. Meghan reportedly became more guarded, controlling, and attentive to appearances, while Prince Harry's response, according to insiders, ranged from cautious to defensive. The children, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the bureaucratic storm swirling around them, but the atmosphere of tension, scrutiny, and uncertainty was palpable. The nanny, who had initiated the complaint, continued her daily responsibilities with a mixture of apprehension and determination, knowing that the safety of the children remained her primary concern. One of the most striking aspects of the CPS involvement was the corroboration of patterns Lauren had observed. Investigators reportedly noted inconsistencies between public appearances and private behaviors. While Meghan frequently presented herself as a loving, attentive mother in interviews, photos, and media events, the home environment appeared to tell a different story. Observers documented instances where the children were left to entertain themselves for long periods, where parental engagement was minimal, and where the focus on public image seemed to outweigh the children's emotional needs. These findings, while not necessarily criminal, raised serious questions about neglect and the responsibilities of caregiving in a high-profile household. Legal experts reviewing similar cases have noted that allegations of emotional neglect and abandonment carry significant weight, especially when corroborated by multiple witnesses and documented patterns. Emotional neglect, while less visible than physical abuse, can have profound, long-lasting effects on children's development, mental health, and emotional resilience. In the context of Meghan Markle's household, the combination of celebrity pressures, public scrutiny, and family dynamics created a unique and complex environment that made CPS's investigation both necessary and challenging. As the investigation progressed, the tension within the household reportedly increased. Staff members were aware of the potential consequences of the complaint, and the adults in the home were forced to navigate the delicate balance between maintaining appearances and addressing legal inquiries. Lauren, meanwhile, continued to act as a key source of information, providing detailed accounts, timelines, and observations to investigators. Her meticulous documentation proved critical in helping CPS build a comprehensive understanding of the children's daily lives and the potential risks they faced. The involvement of CPS also brought unexpected attention to previously overlooked aspects of the household. Investigators reportedly noted a lack of consistent routines, instances of children being left unsupervised, and periods of emotional detachment from Meghan. While these findings did not constitute criminal behavior in every instance, they highlighted systemic issues that demanded intervention. The children's well-being, after all, is paramount, and even subtle patterns of neglect can have lasting consequences if left unaddressed. One of the most dramatic elements of this unfolding story was the way in which Meghan Markle and her advisors responded to CPS scrutiny. According to insiders, efforts to manage the narrative intensified, including heightened media engagement, public statements emphasizing the Duchess's role as a devoted mother, and attempts to frame any concerns as misunderstandings or exaggerations. The contrast between public messaging and private reality, already significant, became even more pronounced under the lens of investigation. It was a high-stakes game of perception management, one in which the lives and safety of children were caught in the balance. For the children themselves, the CPS involvement may have been invisible, but the effects were real. Experts suggest that children are acutely sensitive to household tension, even when they do not understand the reasons behind it. Reports indicate that Archie and Lilibet experienced increased anxiety, confusion, and behavioral changes during this period, reflecting the broader disruption caused by the investigation. Lauren, as their primary caregiver in daily life, remained a stabilizing presence, providing consistency and emotional support amid the uncertainty. As the investigation continued, further revelations began to emerge. CPS reportedly uncovered additional accounts from other staff members, corroborating Lauren's observations and providing a more detailed picture of the household environment. Patterns of neglect, inconsistent routines, and emotional absence became increasingly difficult to dismiss. These findings, combined with Lauren's detailed documentation, painted a compelling narrative of a household struggling to balance fame, public perception, and the basic needs of children. Perhaps most concerning were moments suggesting that the children's emotional needs were consistently deprioritized in favor of public appearances and media narratives. While Meghan's efforts in charity work, public engagements, and personal projects are widely documented, sources suggest that these commitments sometimes came at the expense of attentive parenting. The tension between personal ambition, public expectation, and the demands of child-rearing created a scenario in which neglect, whether intentional or circumstantial, could not be ignored. And yet, despite the gravity of these findings, the story does not conclude neatly. The involvement of CPS opened doors that had previously been closed, but it also introduced new complexities. Legal advisors, public relations teams, and security staff all became entwined in managing both the investigation and the potential fallout. For Lauren, the process was a test of resolve, ethics, and courage as she navigated the challenges of speaking truth to power while safeguarding the children she had grown to love. As the investigation progressed, the implications for Meghan Markle and Prince Harry became increasingly significant. Allegations of neglect, if substantiated, could have serious legal, social, and reputational consequences. Moreover, the validation of concerns raised by a trained professional added weight to claims that had previously been dismissed or ignored. The story, once confined to whispers and rumors, had now entered a stage where the public could no longer remain unaware and where accountability could no longer be deferred. And yet, even as CPS involvement intensified, the most shocking revelations were still to come. Documentation, interviews, and observations hinted at patterns that extended beyond simple neglect, patterns that called into question not only parenting practices, but also fundamental moral choices, priorities, and the well-being of two young children thrust into a world of power, fame, and expectation. The question that hangs over this chapter, and indeed the entire story, is simple yet profound. When children are left vulnerable in the hands of adults who are celebrated for influence, power, and visibility, who bears responsibility when things go wrong? And more urgently, what did CPS find next, and how would those findings reshape the narrative of Meghan Markle, her children, and the household that was supposed to be a safe haven? There are few names in investigative biography that carry the kind of weight Tom Bower does. Known for exposing hidden truths behind the lives of powerful public figures, Bower has spent decades uncovering scandals, secrets, and controversial behaviors that those in positions of fame or influence would rather keep buried. His book on Meghan Markle, initially dismissed by some as sensationalist or overly speculative, now takes on an entirely new gravity in light of Lauren Khumalo's allegations and the CPS involvement. Could it be that Bower was right all along? And if so, what does that mean for the carefully crafted public image of one of the world's most scrutinized women? Bower's claims, laid out meticulously in his biography, painted a portrait of Meghan Markle that conflicted sharply with the media's adoring portrayal. He suggested a woman whose public charm and charisma masked private behaviors that were self-serving, controlling, and at times dismissive of others' needs, even those closest to her. These allegations included claims about her parenting style, her relationships with household staff, and the prioritization of image over personal responsibility. At the time of publication, many readers and journalists dismissed the book as a tabloid-style exposé, arguing that Meghan's public persona, her charitable work, and her articulate media presence disproved such claims. But now, with CPS files emerging and first-hand accounts from Lauren Khumalo, there is a chilling resonance between Bower's allegations and what insiders report today. The parallel is striking. Reports of neglect, inconsistent care, emotional distance from children, and the prioritization of image over familial duties all echo the warnings Bowers sounded years ago. Suddenly, what was once written off as scandal-mongering is being reevaluated through the lens of evidence and professional testimony. Let's unpack this carefully. Bowers' book described a household where appearances were meticulously managed, where Meghan's public image as a loving, modern mother was maintained at all costs, and where the inner workings of the family, relationships with staff, household management, and private child-rearing practices remained opaque, controlled, and often inconsistent. The CPS complaint brought forward by Lauren aligns with these claims. She documented patterns of neglect, abandonment, and emotional detachment that suggest an environment where image, fame, and public perception consistently took precedence over the children's needs. It's crucial to understand the gravity of this alignment. When an investigative biographer predicts a pattern of behavior, and those patterns are later substantiated by professional accounts, the credibility of the original claim skyrockets. In this case, Bowers' depictions of Meghan's household, previously criticized as conjecture, gain unexpected weight and plausibility. For followers of the story, it is a moment of cognitive dissonance. The charming public figure they saw on TV and social media is suddenly layered with allegations that are far more disturbing than they could have imagined. The validation doesn't stop at general behavioral patterns. Specific incidents described by Lauren reportedly echo particular events or claims noted by Bauer. According to sources, there were moments where the children were left unattended, schedules were inconsistent, and emotional responsiveness from Meghan was lacking. Situations Bauer had flagged as emblematic of a broader pattern of neglect and image-conscious parenting. The uncanny similarities between the alleged reality and the predictions of a biographer who had no direct access to daily household life raise questions that are difficult to ignore. Moreover, the validation extends beyond mere coincidence. Experts in child welfare emphasize that patterns of emotional neglect, if repeated consistently, have measurable psychological impacts on children. Bauer's commentary had hinted at consequences for the children's emotional stability, autonomy, and sense of security. The CPS complaint and Lauren's detailed records now provide tangible, contemporaneous observations that align with these earlier warnings. This convergence between predictive biography and first-hand accounts is unusual and deeply unsettling. It suggests that what was once speculative may, in fact, be factual. For the public, this raises uncomfortable questions about accountability and perception. How could someone of Meghan's influence, education, and access to resources allow patterns of neglect to persist? How could public appearances and media narratives so thoroughly mask underlying dysfunction within the household? These questions are not easily answered, yet they lie at the heart of the unfolding scandal. It is also important to consider Prince Harry's role in this context. While much attention focuses on Meghan, sources suggest that Harry was not a constant presence in the children's day-to-day lives during these periods. Reports from staff, including Lauren, indicate that his involvement varied, and when present, he may have deferred parental decisions to Meghan. The dynamic between the two parents, as described by insiders, created a vacuum in which the children's needs were secondary to the couple's public image, travel schedule, and personal priorities. Bauer's original claims about household dynamics now resonate more vividly in light of these insights. The implications of this validation are manifold. For one, it challenges the narrative carefully constructed by Meghan and her team, the narrative of a devoted, hands-on mother who is attentive to her children and actively shaping their upbringing. For another, it highlights the complexity of public scrutiny versus private reality. In a household constantly observed through the lens of media, curated appearances, and social media posts, the private truth often remains hidden, and in this case, it may be far more troubling than anyone expected. Experts in media psychology and public relations emphasize that public perception can be carefully engineered, even when it is inconsistent with reality. Meghan's image, meticulously managed and amplified by press releases, interviews, and social media, created a veneer that obscured the more troubling aspects of her private life. But now, with CPS documentation and insider testimony, cracks in that veneer are becoming increasingly visible. Bauer's predictions, once dismissed, appear not as hyperbole, but as prescient insights into the household's hidden dynamics. The psychological impact of this alignment cannot be overstated. For the public, there is the shock of seeing a beloved or admired figure potentially fall short of expected moral and parental standards. For supporters, it is a painful cognitive dissonance that challenges loyalties and reshapes perceptions. And for the children involved, it is a stark reminder that even those who seem most devoted on the surface may be fallible in the moments that matter most. Yet, while validation of Bauer's claims adds weight to Lauren Khumalo's concerns, it also raises new questions. How did such patterns develop? Were they a result of upbringing, personal choice, the pressures of fame, or a combination of all three? And crucially, what will be done now to ensure the children's welfare moving forward? These are questions that authorities, insiders, and the public are only beginning to grapple with. The validation of Tom Bauer's work also amplifies the stakes for Meghan Markle. Her public image, previously untouchable and widely celebrated, now faces scrutiny not only from media and fans, but from professionals with documented evidence. Every interview, appearance, and social media post is now filtered through a lens of skepticism. What is image, and what is reality? What is protective parenting, and what is performative? The questions cut to the core of fame, accountability, and moral responsibility. As the narrative unfolds, the convergence of predictive biography and insider revelation forms a foundation for the next stage of this exposé, an in-depth examination of what life was truly like inside the household, behind closed doors, and away from cameras, microphones, and public adulation. It is in this private sphere that the stakes were highest, the tensions most acute, and the potential for harm, if unaddressed, most severe. And as we move forward, one question dominates the narrative. If Tom Bauer was right all along, and if Lauren Khumalo's testimony confirms the patterns he predicted, what does this mean for the children, the household staff, and the broader public understanding of Meghan Markle's role as a parent? The answers, as the investigation unfolds, promise to be both shocking and deeply consequential. What is it like behind the walls of a household that the world believes to be perfect? For Meghan Markle, the public image is one of sophistication, grace, and devotion, a duchess, a global icon, and a mother whose every move is celebrated in glossy magazine spreads and viral social media posts. But behind those closed doors, according to insider accounts, including the observations of Lauren Khumalo, the reality may have been far more complicated and far more troubling. What many outside the household never saw was a day-to-day life in which the children, Archie and Lilibet, were sometimes left emotionally adrift, their needs deprioritized, and their presence subordinated to schedules, appearances, and personal ambition. Lauren's accounts paint a picture of a household where structure was inconsistent, attention was selective, and parenting was often reactive rather than proactive. Simple routines, meals, playtime, bedtime, were sometimes disrupted by sudden travel, events, or media appearances. Children reportedly became adept at navigating a world in which the rules shifted daily, where attention was conditional, and where emotional support was sporadic. A child's world thrives on consistency, security, and responsive care, and when those elements are missing, the consequences can ripple across emotional and cognitive development. Multiple staff members, speaking under the condition of anonymity, reportedly confirmed these observations. They described moments when Meghan prioritized meetings, social engagements, or media preparation over attending to Archie or Lilibet's immediate needs. While Harry's involvement was not absent entirely, insiders suggest that he often deferred decisions to Meghan or was otherwise preoccupied, leaving a gap in parental guidance and supervision. The household, in effect, became one where the children had to adapt to the adults' priorities, rather than the other way around. One striking aspect of this alleged reality is the emotional distance reportedly observed between Meghan and her children. In intimate moments, the children were said to seek attention, comfort, or reassurance, only to encounter delayed responses, distraction, or minimal engagement. According to professionals who reviewed these accounts, such emotional absence, even when unintentional, can be deeply damaging. It fosters anxiety, insecurity, and confusion, particularly when children are exposed to the glare of public scrutiny, high expectations, and constant media attention. And yet, the children themselves reportedly remained resilient, finding ways to connect with the adults who were available and relying heavily on Lauren as a stable presence. The nanny became more than a caretaker. She was a buffer between the children and the unpredictability of their household environment. Her role, both emotionally and practically, was indispensable, and it is no surprise that she ultimately took the extraordinary step of contacting CPS when she felt the children's safety and well-being were compromised. The household reportedly operated under a high degree of scrutiny, even internally. Staff were allegedly expected to maintain absolute discretion, to manage the children's schedules flawlessly, and to ensure that every interaction could be presented positively if observed by cameras or publicists. This intense pressure created a culture in which reporting concerns was difficult, and in which the children's needs could be subordinated to the perception of perfection. Lauren's decision to break that silence was therefore both courageous and profoundly consequential. It is also important to consider the effects of fame on parenting in this household. For Meghan and Harry, every moment is magnified, every misstep documented, and every appearance evaluated. Such constant surveillance can distort priorities. Insiders suggest that maintaining image, managing public perception, and engaging in high-profile projects sometimes overshadowed the consistent, attentive care that children require. The tension between public persona and private responsibility created a volatile dynamic, one that Lauren reportedly navigated with growing alarm. Beyond structure and emotional presence, reports suggest that Meghan's parenting style could be controlling, unpredictable, and at times punitive in ways that were inconsistent with the children's needs. Small frustrations, missed instructions, or deviations from expected behavior were said to result in abrupt corrections or emotional distancing. While these behaviors may not constitute intentional harm, their cumulative impact, especially in combination with emotional neglect and abandonment, raises serious concerns. Professionals have long emphasized that children's emotional development is highly sensitive to consistency, warmth, and validation, and the alleged dynamics of the household fell short of these foundational needs. Another key aspect of life behind closed doors was the children's exposure to adult tensions and priorities. Lauren reportedly observed instances in which arguments, planning sessions, or discussions about image management occurred in the presence of the children, creating subtle but significant stress. Even when children are not direct participants in such conflicts, they absorb the emotional climate, leading to heightened anxiety, insecurity, and confusion. The interplay between household stress and parental availability is complex, and according to Lauren, it contributed to a household atmosphere in which the children's emotional security was compromised. Public appearances, charity engagements, and media events were frequent in Meghan's life, and while these are celebrated accomplishments, they reportedly came at a cost. Children were sometimes moved to accommodate travel schedules or appearances, leading to periods of separation from their primary caregivers. For Archie and Lilibet, these separations, coupled with inconsistent attention when present, reportedly fostered feelings of instability. The contrast between a glamorous public life and a chaotic, emotionally inconsistent home environment highlights the tension at the heart of this story, the gap between image and reality, perception and truth. Moreover, insiders suggest that household staff were acutely aware of these dynamics and their implications. Lauren's documentation reportedly included observations not just of neglect, but of patterns of emotional absence, unpredictability, and prioritization of appearances. The culmination of these patterns is what ultimately compelled her to contact CPS, a decision born of moral urgency and professional responsibility. Her courage highlights a central theme of this chapter. In environments where children are vulnerable, it often falls to those with direct access to intervene, even when the cost to themselves is significant. It is also worth noting that the dynamics described here are not unique to Meghan Markle's household. Families in high-profile, high-pressure environments frequently struggle with balancing visibility, responsibility, and personal ambition. What makes this case notable is the public visibility, the legal and social ramifications, and the extraordinary attention given to Meghan as a figurehead. The stakes are magnified not only because of fame, but because the children are themselves public figures, with images circulated worldwide and private moments subject to constant scrutiny. As this chapter draws to a close, the picture emerges of a household that, behind closed doors, may have been defined less by stability and attentive parenting than by image management, emotional inconsistency, and intermittent supervision. Lauren Khumalo's role as a vigilant, concerned nanny becomes central to understanding this reality, providing a lens through which the children's experiences and the allegations of neglect and abandonment can be understood. And just as this chapter ends, the tension escalates. The involvement of CPS, combined with corroborating accounts from staff and documentation, sets the stage for revelations that will challenge public perception, test legal boundaries, and force a confrontation with truths that have long been hidden. The children's welfare is no longer a matter of private concern. It has become a question of accountability, public scrutiny, and moral responsibility. When the world looks at Archie and Lilibet, it sees royal charm, adorable photos, and carefully curated images of happy family moments. But according to insider accounts, including the courageous testimony of Lauren Khumalo, the reality behind the cameras and glossy magazine spreads may be drastically different. These children, so young and so vulnerable, reportedly experienced a childhood shaped not only by the pressures of fame, but by emotional neglect, inconsistency, and an environment where appearances frequently outweighed their most basic needs. Understanding their experience is essential, not to sensationalize, but to reveal the hidden realities that even the most devoted observers cannot see. Archie, the elder of the two, is said to have developed a keen sense of the household dynamics at an unusually young age. Staff reported that he became adept at reading moods, anticipating reactions, and navigating a complex web of adult expectations. While many children learn to interpret social cues naturally, Archie's heightened awareness reportedly stemmed from necessity. In a household where emotional responses were inconsistent, he learned to adjust his behavior to avoid conflict, gain attention, or simply feel safe. Lauren noted that this constant self-monitoring placed significant emotional strain on him, creating pressures no child should endure. Lilibet, the younger sibling, faced a slightly different set of challenges. Observers describe her as highly sensitive and intuitive, yet often met with minimal emotional engagement from Meghan. Unlike public images of a doting mother-daughter relationship, insiders report moments in which Lilibet sought comfort, reassurance, or guidance, only to encounter distraction, dismissal, or absence. For a toddler, these repeated experiences of unresponsiveness can foster confusion, insecurity, and the sense that their needs are secondary, even within a loving family. According to child development experts, such emotional gaps in early life can influence attachment styles, self-esteem, and the ability to navigate relationships later on. One particularly alarming pattern reported by staff involved the children being left in the care of aides or alone in the household while Meghan and Harry attended engagements or traveled. While the parents were not entirely absent, their availability reportedly prioritized social, professional, or media obligations over consistent caregiving. Lauren documented instances where Archie and Lilibet were left unsupervised for extended periods, sometimes with little more than instructions to occupy themselves. While no physical harm was reported, the potential emotional impact was significant, raising concerns about neglect, abandonment, and the long-term effects on their development. Another dimension of their childhood, according to insiders, involved constant exposure to adult tension, planning, and media management. Staff reportedly observed the children absorbing adult stress, hearing conversations they were too young to fully understand, and sensing the household's fluctuating emotional climate. Experts emphasize that children in such environments can experience heightened anxiety, stress, and confusion, particularly when parental attention is inconsistent or when they are inadvertently made witnesses to adult conflicts and pressures. The children's daily routines reportedly lacked the structure that professionals consider critical for emotional and cognitive development. Meals were sometimes irregular, sleep schedules disrupted, and playtime subordinated to the household's shifting priorities. In moments when Meghan or Harry were present, their engagement was reportedly intermittent and often dictated by the parents' schedules or media considerations rather than the children's needs. These inconsistencies, while perhaps not intentional, reportedly contributed to a household atmosphere where the children had to navigate their world largely on their own terms. Even the small joys of childhood, according to insiders, were affected. Activities like bedtime stories, playdates, and simple affectionate interactions were reportedly limited or inconsistent. Public appearances painted a starkly different picture, showing cheerful interactions captured by cameras and carefully curated moments designed to present a seamless narrative of family harmony. Yet behind closed doors, the children were negotiating a reality that demanded adaptability, resilience, and emotional self-reliance far beyond their years. The consequences of these experiences were visible in subtle but significant ways. Staff reported that Archie sometimes displayed advanced problem-solving skills, emotional sensitivity, and a capacity for empathy, all of which may have been adaptive responses to a demanding environment. Lilibet, meanwhile, reportedly demonstrated early signs of caution and wariness, a heightened sensitivity to moods, and a deep need for reassurance. While these traits reflect resilience, they also indicate that the children's emotional world was shaped by gaps in consistent care, attention, and stability. Lauren Kumalo's decision to contact CPS can be understood in this context. Her observations went beyond individual incidents. They revealed a cumulative pattern of behavior that placed the children at risk of emotional harm. By documenting these experiences and raising concerns, she sought to intervene not in an abstract sense, but in a deeply practical and moral one, to protect the children from patterns of neglect, abandonment, and emotional inconsistency that could have long-term consequences. Her courage highlights the ethical responsibility of those closest to children, especially in households where visibility is high but oversight and accountability are low. There are also allegations, according to insiders, that Meghan's approach to parenting sometimes involved emotional withdrawal or punitive responses when the children did not meet expectations or comply with sudden changes in household routines. While staff emphasized that these actions may not have been intended as harm, their effect on the children's emotional development was reportedly significant. Experts stress that even brief periods of emotional withdrawal, repeated over time, can influence attachment, trust, and the child's sense of security within the family unit. The children's exposure to public scrutiny further complicated their early development. Archie and Lilibet, like many children of public figures, exist in a dual reality: the private world of home and family, and the public world of cameras, headlines, and social media commentary. According to staff, this constant oscillation heightened stress and confusion. In a household where parental attention was sometimes inconsistent, the children reportedly learned to adjust their behavior not just for survival, but for presentation, a skill no child should need to develop at such a young age. Another dimension of their childhood reportedly involved isolation. Despite living in a world saturated with celebrity connections, the children were said to have limited peer interaction, consistent friendships, or social routines outside the household bubble. Experts suggest that these factors can affect social development, emotional resilience, and the ability to form secure relationships outside the family unit. Lauren's interventions, her documentation, and her eventual CPS report were therefore motivated not only by immediate safety concerns, but by an understanding of the long-term implications of social and emotional neglect. The accounts of Archie and Lilibet's early years are deeply unsettling, not because of sensationalized drama, but because they reveal the vulnerability of children navigating a household dominated by fame, public expectation, and parental priorities that sometimes placed image over care. Their experiences underscore a broader truth. Visibility does not equal safety, attention does not equal care, and love, if inconsistent, can be experienced as absence. As this chapter closes, one thing becomes clear. The childhood of Archie and Lilibet, while filled with moments of joy, affection, and wonder, was also shaped by emotional gaps, inconsistencies, and the complex interplay of fame and family. The children's experiences provide essential context for understanding the decisions of Lauren Khumalo, the involvement of CPS, and the validation of earlier claims by Tom Bauer. Their childhood, hidden from the world, is the lens through which the story of neglect, abandonment, and moral accountability must be viewed. And just as we move forward, the tension escalates further. The world is about to learn not just what the children endured, but how Meghan Markle's decisions, priorities, and behaviors intersected with legal, social, and ethical consequences in ways that no one could have anticipated. The moment Child Protective Services became involved, the equilibrium of Meghan Markle's household reportedly shifted dramatically. What had been a controlled environment, where appearances were carefully managed and staff operated under a strict protocol of discretion, suddenly became a landscape of tension, suspicion, and constant scrutiny. For Meghan, whose public persona was meticulously curated, the news of an official complaint alleging neglect and abandonment was a shock with both personal and reputational implications. How she responded in the days and weeks following the CPS intervention would set the stage for a dramatic upheaval within the household. According to insiders, Meghan's initial reaction was a mixture of disbelief and defensiveness. While she maintained an outward composure, reports suggest that in private, she experienced moments of frustration, anger, and fear. Fear not only of legal consequences, but of public exposure. Every action she had taken to construct a narrative of the perfect mother now seemed vulnerable to scrutiny. Staff observed that the household atmosphere, once organized and predictable, had become charged with tension. Lauren Khumalo noted subtle but significant changes in Meghan's demeanor. More controlling, more guarded, and increasingly preoccupied with appearances. Harry's response, according to sources, was equally complex. As the father of Archie and Lilibet, he faced the difficult task of balancing support for his wife, concern for his children, and the implications of an official investigation. Some insiders describe him as cautious and, at times, conflicted, aware of the seriousness of the allegations but hesitant to confront them publicly. The dynamic between Meghan and Harry reportedly intensified the emotional climate of the household, creating moments of friction that the children could sense, even if they didn't understand the reasons. One of the immediate consequences of CPS involvement was heightened scrutiny of daily routines. Staff reported that Meghan began to monitor every interaction, every schedule, and every moment of caregiving more closely. While oversight can be beneficial, sources suggest that the sudden intensity created a rigid, high-pressure environment. Staff members who had previously worked under expectations of discretion now felt the weight of accountability in a more acute way, unsure of how to balance compliance with the family's desires and the legal expectations arising from CPS involvement. The children, too, reportedly felt the effects of this heightened tension. Archie and Lilibet, previously accustomed to a certain level of inconsistency and attention, suddenly faced an environment of increased oversight and unpredictable reactions. While some changes were designed to protect them, the emotional climate reportedly became more stressful, with children needing to navigate not only their parents' behavior, but also the anxious energy of household staff aware of the ongoing investigation. Professionals emphasize that such environmental shifts can intensify anxiety in children, particularly when routines, stability, and emotional predictability are already fragile. Another aspect of the fallout involved the media and public relations efforts surrounding the household. Sources indicate that Meghan's team intensified efforts to control the narrative, releasing statements, engaging in selective media interviews, and emphasizing her role as a devoted mother. While public messaging aimed to project normalcy and parental devotion, insiders describe an environment behind the scenes that was anything but calm. The tension between image management and reality reportedly created a culture of fear, hyper-awareness, and constrained behavior among staff. Lauren Khumalo, as the central figure who initiated CPS involvement, reportedly found herself under scrutiny as well. Staff members and other insiders suggest that she faced subtle pressure and intimidation, likely intended to discourage further disclosure. Yet her commitment to the children's well-being reportedly remained unwavering. She continued to provide detailed accounts, observations, and documentation, ensuring that CPS had the information necessary to assess the household accurately. Her courage in maintaining professional integrity, despite personal and career risk, underscores the moral complexity of the situation. In addition to emotional and logistical upheaval, the fallout reportedly included significant tension between Meghan and other household staff. Those who had previously operated with relative freedom under Meghan's management suddenly found themselves navigating a more rigid, high-stakes environment. Reports suggest that minor infractions, delays, or disagreements were met with heightened scrutiny or disapproval, contributing to a culture of stress and uncertainty. The balance between loyalty, discretion, and moral responsibility became increasingly precarious for all involved. From a psychological perspective, the household turmoil had significant implications for the children. Experts note that children are highly sensitive to environmental tension, even when they are not the direct target of conflict. According to staff reports, Archie and Lilibet exhibited subtle behavioral changes, increased anxiety, clinginess, and hyper-awareness of adult moods. Lauren, ever attentive, reportedly worked to provide emotional stability, creating a buffer between the children and the storm of scrutiny enveloping the household. Her role as both protector and witness became more crucial than ever. The legal dimension also intensified the situation. CPS investigators were tasked with evaluating not just anecdotal claims, but concrete evidence, including detailed records maintained by Lauren. The presence of documented observations reportedly placed additional pressure on Meghan and Harry, highlighting the gap between public perception and private reality. Legal advisors and PR